F12 was originally released, I remember thinking to myself, that might be the most gorgeous car I've ever seen, followed by 731 horsepower is a ridiculous amount in a rear-wheel drive car. When you look closer at the F12, you not only notice how gorgeous it is, but how much detail and thought was put into the aerodynamics of the vehicle. So what do I mean by that? Well, take a look here. These active aerodynamic flaps actually only open when the car requires additional brake cooling. Additional airflow flows through and cools the brakes. Now come on over here. This is called the aero bridge. Air actually passes over the front of the F12 and through here, down the side. I can actually touch my hands together in between the aero bridge. The real magic, however, lies under the F12's massive hood, a 6.3 liter naturally aspirated V12. Now in typical Ferrari fashion, it's finished in red wrinkle paint, none of that carbon fiber or plastic engine cover BS just to make it look fancier. It's a 65-degree V12 with an incredibly high compression ratio of 13.5 to 1. But the best part, it revs up to 8,700 RPMs. Well, actually, the best part is probably that it cranks out 731 horsepower and 508 pound-feet of torque. But with a red line of 8,700 RPMs, the F12 is an absolute screamer. And this thing isn't stock. It's got a tune and an IPE exhaust, so it makes more power and it's louder and even more epic. Before we start the car up, I have to go over one of the craziest features of the Ferrari F12, and that is that it's extremely practical. So what do I mean by that? Well, pop the trunk to reveal 17.7 cubic feet of storage space combined with this rear parcel shelf behind the seats. 17.7 cubic feet. How does that compare to something like the Lamborghini Aventador? Well, that has just 5.3 cubic feet of room in the back. How about a Nissan GTR? That's a practical car, right? 8.8 cubic feet of storage space. This even has more cargo space than a Corvette, which only has 15. All right, let's shut this and fire up that crazy sounding V12. The F12 is practical in the interior as well. We've got a cup holder right here in the center. Underneath this carbon fiber bridge where you've got reverse, automatic, and launch, you have a space to place your phone or keys. We've even got a large glove box. Click the open button here to reveal a somewhat sizable space for storing things. And then of course, behind the rear seats, you've got tons of space to put backpacks and even carry-on bags. More in terms of practicality is the transmission. The only transmission offered in the Ferrari F12 is a 7-speed double clutch transmission. Its predecessor, the 599, will likely remain the last ever Ferrari with a V12 to come in a manual. How many of those do they make? Just 30. That explains why some of the even really poorly equipped and spec'd 599 GTBs are selling for well over $500,000 purely because those ones have a manual. Just the transmission alone is a huge reason to buy an F12 over its competitor, the Lamborghini Aventador. The Aventador has a single clutch ISR gearbox that slams you between shifts, which is fun, won't deny that, but around town, it's horrible and almost undrivable. With the F12 and the double clutch transmission, driving around town is super smooth, almost as easy as just driving a regular automatic car. Automatics are the way of the future. Is it less fun than a manual car? Well, it depends on which vehicle you're talking about. The F12 is a large, incredibly fast GT cruiser. It's comfortable, it's easy to drive, so having the DCT makes sense. Honestly, it's so fast that having it in a manual would be pretty difficult to drive. Now, if it had less horsepower, it was lighter, something like a 458 Speciale in a manual, I would sell my soul for that car. Let's take some time to bask in the glory that is the Ferrari F12 steering wheel. Finished in gorgeous carbon fiber, it's got a flat bottom, it's meaty, it feels great in your hands, and it's got everything you would want but not too much, the turning indicators are actually buttons on the steering wheel. That frees up extra space that would be taken up by stalks in the rear of the steering wheel for massive carbon fiber paddles. We even have the windshield wiper controls on the steering wheel itself, as well as the horn on the upper grips instead of the center, so that the steering wheel center can remain beautiful. This steering wheel even has a shift indicator light that pops up as you get close to red line on the top of the steering wheel. That is awesome. Now below that and to the right, we have the Manatino dial that changes the dynamics of the Ferrari. Not only does it look really cool, but it's ergonomic as well. For those that don't want to have any fun in life, we have wet mode that tames the car down. For normal day-to-day driving, we've got sport. For those that really want to have some fun, we've got race. And for those who have Chris Harris levels of confidence and skill, we have CT off and ESC off. I won't be doing that. CT off turns F1 traction control off, yet leaves stability control on, so you can perform epic slides, yet still save yourself. If you put it in ESC off, every single electronic aid is turned off, and the only thing between you and death is the control you have on your right foot. The engine start button is also located on the steering wheel, although it does require a key. Go ahead and insert the red Ferrari key just to the right of the steering wheel on the steering column. Click it all the way. The Ferrari makes a bunch of annoying noises, but you can silence that by putting your foot on the brake and hitting the engine start button. Oh. In order to turn the car off, you cannot click the engine start. It doesn't say stop. All you do is turn it counterclockwise. Last order of business before we take the F12 out for a drive is talking about the passenger side display. This is an option that most F12s don't have, and it's a blessing and a curse. Well, it is extremely cool, but it depends on who your passenger is. Why is that? Well, it shows anything from RPMs to speed to what gear you're in, but imagine if all of a sudden this shows 140 miles an hour, your passenger would know. Now you can change it by clicking the display button here. It shows you your maximum speed that you've taken in the last trip. Looks like the owner of this car went. Shows you your trip traveling distance. The next display mode shows you what drive modes you're in, so you can't lie to your passenger and say that traction control is on when in fact it's clearly off. This specific F12 has the optional Ferrari racing seats. Now, despite the fact that they look incredibly intense and hold you in very well, they're actually really comfortable. Over long distances, you don't get sore, you don't suffer from lower back pain. I went on a bunch of Ferrari chat forums and everyone seems to agree, unless you are of abnormal proportions, way too tall or way too short, people enjoy the comfort of the race seats. That's pretty surprising. The overall aesthetics of the racing seats are brilliant, and they're carbon fiber, so they're quite light. Adjustability, we've got manual controls for forward and back. They do tilt backwards and forwards with the click of a button, and we have an interesting lever here that you push down to lower the seat or pull up to raise it. Let's go ahead and fire the car up, turn the key to the right, click the engine start button, put the car in first gear, and let's actually experience what the F12 is like in automatic mode, driving it around town. At slow speeds, the F12 is really quite comfortable to drive. The transmission isn't jerky in any way, it smoothly flows from gear to gear in automatic mode, and the steering is quite light. The F12 is a car that you could actually drive every single day, something you absolutely cannot say about the Lamborghini Aventador. It would drive you mad if you tried to drive that every day. And with storage space like this, larger than in a Corvette, one of the most practical sports cars out there, you can go on long road trips with ease with your wife, even if she needs to carry 10 different bags. But this would be a very boring review if all I did was talk about how practical it was and easy it was to drive at slow speeds. So we're gonna click the auto button here in the center to put it back into manual mode, flick it up into race, and give it a little bit more gas. Is that a straightaway I see? Oh, okay. Oh my God! Oh. Yeah, that V12 is one of the best sounding engines of all time, especially with this ridiculous IPE exhaust. Now, I do want to give a special shout out to Anrky wheels, the ones that are doing my awesome Huracan wheels, as well as Wheels Boutique and IPE for coming together and making this review possible while I'm out in Florida. This thing is a downright treat. 0 to 60, Ferrari claims in 3 seconds. Magazines have tested anywhere from 3 to 3.5, simply because this thing likes to do massive burnouts if you turn traction control off. If you leave traction control on, which I just did in that poll, you can feel the car limiting itself as it's accelerating in first gear. After that though, this car absolutely flies. This thing is so damn awesome. All right, stay professional, Parker. This is a review. You must be unbiased and informative and tell the people all about what it's like to drive the F12. Well, with an engine that sounds like that, I really can't focus on anything other than when the next straightaway is so I can floor it once again. The F12 has double wishbone suspension and magneto-aerological dampers. Now, this is not a new technology by any means. In fact, GM uses it in a lot of their cars, but it's really, really good. So what are magneto-aerological dampers? Well, essentially, the viscosity of the fluid inside the dampers is changed and altered by a magnetic field. This can happen incredibly quickly so that the car is comfortable to drive on the road, soaks up approaching bumps, and acts very precisely and responds well with limited body roll on the track. The visibility in the F12 is fantastic, especially for a supercar. The only thing that makes this car a bit challenging is the fact that this one didn't come with a backup camera. The construction of the F12 is quite interesting. Its space frame chassis as well as its body shell are made up of 12 different alloys, perhaps one for each cylinder that the F12 has. This allows the body shell to be 110 pounds lighter than its predecessor, the 599, while boosting torsional rigidity of the chassis by 20%. The dimensions of the car have been altered quite a bit as well. It's shorter and lower to the ground than the 599. It also has a longer front overhang, and the weight distribution, despite having that enormous V12 in the front, is 46 to 54. In front of me, we have an enormous center-mounted analog tachometer. It's finished in a lovely yellow color with red accents. To the left and to the right of that, we have TFT digital displays that are fully customizable. We've also got information about how much gas we have left. Speaking of which, this car gets atrocious fuel economy. V12 Ferraris absolutely suck gas. But do you care? No, you do not. Just a side note. We've got a half tank of gas and it says we only have 72 miles of range left in the F12. That's almost hilarious. Over in the center of the car, we have controls for the climates. I actually love the shape of the vents. These rounded spaceship R2-D2 looking things with carbon fiber surrounds look really cool. Because the F12 is lower to the ground and has a longer front overhang than the 599, it's imperative that it has a front lift system, which of course it does. But the front lift system has the ugliest button I've ever seen in any car for a front lift. In the Rolls-Royce Phantom I just reviewed, every button has a little beautiful outline of a Rolls-Royce Phantom. In this case, the button looks like a cartoon taxi cab driven by a 3-year-old with two round things underneath and an arrow pointing upwards. Right under that is the controls for the infotainment. We've put it onto main menu. We've got options from radio, media. The funny part is the launch button is positioned right next to the hazard button. That's what happens when you've got a 730 horsepower rear-wheel drive car. They know if you're gonna launch it, you might as well have the emergency flashers right there next to it in case something goes wrong. Oh, another straightaway. Yeah, that doesn't get old. That would never get old. If you've got the car in race or CT off, this doesn't work in wet or sport, you can click a button to the left of the steering wheel labeled VDA. That's the vehicle dynamics. It can tell you anything from how the tires are doing. Currently they're all green, so I assume they are warm, to what the individual settings of the car are, from the F1 traction control, the electronic differential, ESC, ABS, and a bunch of others. The number of alterations you can make when speccing out an F12 is staggering. Part of the reason why the $323,000 base price of an F12 is laughable compared to what the majority of them for sale and online actually were. Carbon fiber this, Alcantara that, raising the price well up into the $450,000 range. I mean, you've gotta have the under door cover in carbon fiber and a heated insulated windshield. What are you, a peasant? The F12 was the last Ferrari designed by Pininfarina. Part of the reason why the F12 and the 458 are so gorgeous and the 812 and the 488 are, well, not. I definitely need to get my hands on an 812 Superfast to review, so if you have one, shoot me an email at vehiclevirgins@gmail.com and let's set it up. Honestly, the only thing I don't like about the F12 is how light the steering is. If they firmed that up in sport and race mode, it would make it a more fun car to drive. Other than that, the F12 has absolutely blown my mind. It's comfortable, it's incredibly fun to drive, it sounds insane, it's practical. The car is incredibly easy to drive, much more so than the Aventador, which I'd rank highly on the not easy to drive scale. It's just a really good all-around fun supercar slash GT. And with that, I'm gonna pull over, put on the point of view camera, show you what it's like to drive this thing from a first person point of view, and let you hear that gorgeous F12 without me totally ruining everything. cut to the point of view. Engine start. Love these red seat belts. And off we go. Once again, turning indicators are on the steering wheel. We'll click that. Let's let her rip, shall we? That sound, my God! The throttle response is instant in the F12, but something about the way the pedal feel is, it's nice and smooth. It doesn't feel jumpy in any way. It just comes on. Of course, there are no turbochargers. There's no supercharger, but it feels so good. We've got 315 millimeter tires in the rear. Guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this review. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. Let's give it one last blast in the F12. See you next time.